In this lesson titled Chart Types, we're in Workbook 7, Creating Charts, and Worksheet tab, Chart Types. In a previous lesson, we talked a little bit about a quick way to create charts, and we're going to start again by doing that. We're going to put our cursor just anywhere in this data set right here, this range of data, and we're going to hit Alt F1. And it quickly created a chart for us. Our concern, however, when we look at this, is we don't have a chart title yet, but the major problem with this chart is that you can see our data doesn't look very good. It's really quite difficult to tell what's happening here. Our problem is that we have grand total in our chart. I want to make this point that typically we do not show totals or grand totals in our charts because we want to just compare all the data, not necessarily see the final outcome of that data. Earlier we learned that whenever you create a chart, it will highlight the data where it came from. In this case it does. And you can easily change that data. I can grab this corner here and change the selection, and I am no longer highlighting the totals. Grand total here and total here is no longer highlighted. And you can see that it dramatically changed my chart. So if you use a shortcut like Alt F1 to create a chart, then you might need to readjust the selection in your data. But there's another way of doing it, and I'm going to just make sure that's selected. I'll hit delete on my keyboard. You can also select your data first. I'll select my data right here, and then I could hit either Alt F1 or I can go to Insert and Recommended Charts, or I could simply choose the actual chart that I want. So you can always select your data first and then make a chart selection. So with my data selected first, I'm going to click on Recommended Charts on the Insert tab. And I'll drag this into view over here, and we see the recommended chart. It's very similar to what we got when we did Alt F1 as a shortcut. It gave me clusters here. This is a clustered column bar chart, and so these are the clusters showing me the regions with the products. And I might decide I want that. This one's also very popular, and it's stacked. Now, when you have a lot of information, it might be useful to use this stacked layout. Here is a bar, and it's row instead of column, and you can see that looks a little different, but this one I'm going to go for now. It's the one that Excel usually recommends, and I'm going to say OK. So I didn't get a chart title. We were also unable to highlight it because of the way that this cell was merged up here. But what I want to point out is now we no longer have the totals, so this data looks much better because we don't have the totals. And you can see over here on this selection that it does not include the totals. So I'm going to select the totals again, can see that, and without the totals. So that's probably the #1 problem with chart creation is they'll include the totals and things just don't look right. Why don't we take a look at some of the options we have once we have created a title and a chart. Why don't we take a look at some of the options we have once we create a chart. The first thing we notice here is we have a chart title, and that is just a text box, and you could select it and type over it. You can double click on it and drag and select all of it and be ready to type over it. And I could just simply start typing in whatever I wanted my title to be. But I'm going to hit Control-Z on my keyboard to undo. I want to show you a little shortcut, especially when you have a long title. You select the title once. Now, you don't want your cursor blinking in here. You're not editing the title. You've just simply selected the title. And once you've done that, you can do what seems kind of like a formula because it starts with equals. You simply hit equals, and you'll see equals shows up in your formula bar. So this is selected. I hit equals on my keyboard. Equals showed up here. And then I select my title. It's right here. I click, and you can see it's continuing my little formula here. It's giving me the reference for it. And then I just simply hit enter. And it will take that title and put it in here. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo. I just want to show you where sometimes this goes wrong. What happens is you click in here to edit the title. So I have a blinking cursor. Then you hit equals on your keyboard and you'll just insert an equals symbol. And that's not what you want. So let me erase that. I'm going to click away so I can just select it, no blinking cursor, and say equals, select my title, and just hit enter. Now there's a great feature for making your data look more representative of the idea that you want to get across. And what I mean by that is a chart typically is like this. In this case we have some items, some products, and they are clustered or they are grouped by region. And we have a legend down here showing us that region. But what if I wanted to see how my regions were doing by product? In other words, kind of the reverse of this, where all the regions were up here and the products were down here in the legend. Well, lucky for us, if you select your chart, you have up here in the data group something called switch row column. So if we click on that, we'll see that it actually did switch. The emphasis is now about region with our product down here in the legend. This is so useful that you typically see people do something like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to right click on the chart. So I'm going to right click on the chart and I'm going to choose copy. Now I'm going to unselect the chart. I'm going to just click over here. The chart's not selected. And over here I will right click and choose paste. I'm just going to use my first option here, paste. And we get an exact duplicate. And now I can go back to my design tab and choose switch row column, and I get the other version of the chart. So here they are, the same data side by side, but we can see it in different ways. We can see it by product and we can also see it by region. Now I want to give you a caveat or something that you should look out for. I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard to get rid of this chart. Sometimes we try to copy and we might do something like copy up here on the home tab and then say, okay, now I want a copy of that, so I'm now going to paste, and I hit paste. And what it did was it copied the data and pasted the data into this one chart. I don't have two charts, just one. And it added to the data. I hit paste again and it adds more data to my chart. So that's not what we wanted. I'm going to hit Control Z for undo a couple of times and get back again. The trick is that after you copy, unselect your chart, right click, and then you can choose paste and you'll get a copy over here. There we are. There's our copy. And I'm going to go back to my design tab and switch row column. And so we have both of these side by side. Very useful switch row column. Now let's look at some other types of charts. So I'm going to go ahead and select this and hit delete on my keyboard. I'm going to just go ahead and select just the data I want. So I'm going to select this. I'm not going to select my totals. And now I'm going to go over here to Insert tab and over into my Charts group. And instead of recommended chart, maybe I already know that for something like this that I want a line chart. So I'm going to click on Line Chart. I'm going to click the little drop arrow and it's going to give me several choices. And I get a live preview. And I'll say, you know, this is really kind of what I'm looking for right here. So I click and say OK. Now with this type of data that changes from year to year or day to day or hour to hour, it flows over time is the point. And so a line chart works very well for that. So if you already know the type of chart you want, it's really quite easy to just simply select your data and then go over to Insert and then actually choose the type you want. Now, you might have to hold your mouse over each one of these to kind of see what they are. So you can see the kind of chart they are. And you may want to change your chart type from time to time and just kind of explore, you know, what you like or don't like about those charts. Well, if we want to change it with it selected, I come over here to my Design tab and I do have a Change Chart Type. So if I click on that, it will actually list every single type of chart that's available in Excel with the options inside of that chart type. So for instance, I could change that to a pie chart, and let's Select that. So here's our pie chart, and you'll notice something kind of interesting. It has no problem giving us the categories for every single year listed, right? Here's all of our years. But what about our categories here? USA, Asia, Africa, EU. Only USA is listed. That's because a pie chart can only handle one category. So all it could handle is USA. So a pie chart might not be our best choice for that. So I could come over here to change chart type and simply change that back. So let's go back to a line, and here's some options within our line. Here's over here, it's kind of interesting, it's a 3D line, and sometimes that's useful, and other times that's even more difficult to really understand what's happening, isn't it? So we might want to go back. Let's go back to change chart type, and let's go back to a line, but just more of a standard line here. And say OK. So just remember, you can always select your data first. You can always come over to Insert and actually choose the very chart type that you want, or you can use Recommended and go through its choices. And you can always change the type you want. On the Design tab, there is Change Chart Type.